Welcome to HCD's MindSet. I'm Michelle Nagella.
And I'm Kathryn Ambrose.
We are on a mission to help you identify what consumer science innovations have a lot of untapped value or are too good to be true.
So join us for more curious conversations as we try to make sense of the complex but fascinating world of human behavior. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to MindSet. We are so happy to have you with us again today. It is your hosts, Kathryn and Michelle.
Hi.
And we are so excited today to be joined by Pedro, who is the CEO of MindProber. Pedro, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, very well. Thank you for your invite. Thank you, Kathryn. Thank you, Michelle. Very happy to be here.
And where are you calling from?
So I'm actually at our offices in Porto, Portugal. So most of the team is based in Porto, and then we have some people in the US and in the UK.
Very cool. And would you mind, just for the people that aren't aware about who you are or what MindProber is, can you just give an idea of your origin story as well as the company that that you're a part of?
Sure. So my background is psychology. So I did social psychology. I studied social psychology, finished my course in 2006. And then I took a PhD. So I started in my PhD. So I had pretty much an academic path. So I did a PhD in psychology in the field of cognitive neuroscience. So mostly doing electrophysiology, so evoked potentials, EEG, working with criminal populations most of the time, working with psychopathy. And I've always had a mixed, let's say a mixed role where I was at the same time that I was just doing all the academic work and publishing on emotional processing, psychopathy, EEG. I had sort of an applied, I've always had interest in applied psychophysiology. As an example, very, very early on, we had in my lab, which was a small lab we grew from 3 people when we started to around 40 people when I left the lab.
Oh, wow. That's a big lab.
It is a big lab, and it has a very, very distant. So the neuropsychophysiology lab at the University of Porto, very, very decent and very high quality publication. So if you want to go check it out. And so we were, back then I had this unit, so it was Portugal. We were running for funding, of course, so we needed funding. So we started what was called the science to business department, which I was part of leading initially, and we were doing applied psychophysiology. You could think of,
So why business? What was the interest in business? Because that's where the money was, or did you have a specific question maybe someone posed to you?
Well, it started out as a pool. So it started out as someone who actually came from us. It was actually a public institution. They were interested in physiological indicators of cognitive load. And they wanted us to, on one hand, validate one of their systems. So they based their system on, they had like small cameras. This was 2005, 2006. They had like small cameras which would look at the rate of blinking. And they needed to validate that system with, this was the initial request, and we were using EEG to understand fatigue and to actually cross the data that we're getting from the EEG with the blink rate to understand whether the 2 data streams actually.
So if we were to take a step back and think about why you decided to go for cognitive neuroscience, or maybe even what intrigued you about psychology in general, like what led you down this path? Did you always want to be a psychologist?
Not at well. I never knew what I wanted to be. Well, I still don't know what I want to be.
My dad always said that. He lived to be 85, and he would say, "I don't know what I want to be when I grow up."
It's like life takes you, and you go where where it takes you, or you go just where it pulls you. I think I wanted psychology. So initially I wanted to be a psychologist. I think I wanted to be a clinical psychologist initially.
Yeah, me too.
But but I didn't. But I switched my mind very.
Yeah.
I think on my second year of university, I came across cognitive science, and so that was my first passion. Not neuroscience, but hard cognitive science. And we started, and I started a discussion group with someone who then became my colleague at the lab. He's a professor now at the Faculty of Psychology. He's like my, we're sort of the same age. We've done all our track together, and we started something which was called the Cognitive Science Discussion Group. So we were trying to, bring people from philosophy, philosophy of mind, and so from all these people, and we're trying to bring them in and build a cognitive science group, which was sort of a little bit, let's call it, harder than clinical psychology. And so initially we were doing that, and we were very young, and that led to neuroscience. So that led to, back then we didn't have neuroscience, we had psychophysiology.
Right. Yep.
So we started, I fell in love with psychophysiology. And the way, and again, life takes you. So one day, one professor from psychophysiology told us, and this was 2004, earlier, 2002 or 2003. He said, "Hey guys, listen, we've just bought a new evoked potentials equipment." So they had just bought an EEG. They were starting to do ERPs. Who wants to do a summer internship? And what we had to do, so I had to spend the summer there, just going through Apex, cleaning the signal, doing artifact detection. Back then, everything was
really
manual.
fun stuff.
Yeah, very manual too back then.
And I was the only guy who did it. So I was the only guy who appeared. And so I spent one summer doing that. And later on, a couple of years later, he got funded. So this was my professor. He wasn't really my supervisor on the thesis, but informally he was. So my supervisor was the director of the lab, a professor called João Marques Teixeira, not very easy to. And this person who sort of mentored me was a professor called Fernando Barbosa. 2 years after, he said, "Hey Pedro, we've got a scholarship. You were the only guy who appeared. Are you interested in getting this scholarship?" And back then it was funded by a pharmaceutical, and it was to do evoked potential, so event-related potentials in recidivist criminals in prison.
So wow,
very interesting.
So that's how I started.
And that makes sense from a pharmaceutical standpoint, wanting to understand psychopathy. I think your experience, like doing that very hands-on manual cleaning of such large amounts of data, is part of what intrigues us about your viewpoint on this type of work, because I think a lot of people who don't have those type of experiences haven't seen sort of the ugliness of what the data actually looks like. They take it for granted, and they think that, you slap an EEG on it, you can like read people's minds. But of course, you've seen what the actual data looks like. It's messy. Brains are very active. There's a lot going on. So you're doing your PhD, and you're starting to do more business type of work. How does one go from that very academic sort of beginning, even with the applied side, to becoming a CEO?
Oh, well, life takes you there. I always wanted to do something, and I always wanted to do something on the applied side. The academia is not very friendly when you want to go into business. Even if you're, even if you're bringing funding, there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of, you need permission. So everything is a research project. So things take time, and taking time does not combine with clients who want things done yesterday. And so very fast we understood, okay, this is interesting. We can get some money for applied research, but it is for institutions who can, afford to wait. If I want to do something applied, I need to do it fast. So now comes, the second part, in parallel with me, being having the scholarship and being a research assistant, etc. I was actually doing social psychology. So my training was in social psychology. Back then, an area called social psychology of economy and politics. which was mostly preparing psychologists to become market research consultants.
Oh, interesting.
So it was back then it was, and this was very new, and it was sort of the vision of the person who actually started back then this area. Another professor who's like a very big reference for me, called José Marques. He started this area, and he said, okay, I'm gonna get these kids, I'm gonna train them in, multivariate statistics, data science, and so these kids are really going to be good at
before data science was even a thing.
Yeah. So basically, well, back then it was multivariate statistics, and and we would just do multivariate statistics. And I became a consultant, so I did my internship in a market research company.
Okay.
And I did my internship there, and then I started working as a consultant there. So I finished the course, and I was at the same time starting to do my PhD and a consultant in the market research.
Because you weren't doing enough.
You know what? Because I just love those fields so much, and they touch. So the thing is, all of this touches. So there's so many points of contact. So back then, I like to say, for me, everything was time series. Because I was in the lab, everything for me was time series, and I was like pitching the director, which gave me money to actually do this, the president of the company. I was pitching him to do what is today a sort of dial where people just tell me, well, I like this, I don't like this, and I was like, he gave me an informatic back then who was allowing me to program this on a PDA. So
okay.
PDA?
Oh yeah, PDA. Yeah.
Okay. So we were programming this on PDAs because we were mostly interested in political marketing. So this company worked with the political parties, and so hey, we need to test speeches. I need the time granularity that a data series gives me. I can just ask questions in the end. So I need to understand, on each second what people think. So we were building this, and so really cool applied type of thing. And then of course it just comes naturally. Hey, why am I not mixing sheer measures of how activated people are? And so that's sort of the origin story of MindProber, is me trying to get more temporal resolution on a survey type, and then thinking, hey, why is this only explicit? Why is it not implicit? And of course, then you start to look at the different metrics, you start to look at the different signals, and you understand that EEG is like super noisy. You started, and so back then, it was like, back then I was already talking with people who became founders with me of MindProber. We were, spending our nights at the lab just testing stuff, testing, alpha symmetry. So we're like, hey, alpha symmetry, can they discriminate valence with alpha symmetry? And we would just go and, just trying to, okay, this is super stochastic. Okay, how do we make it less stochastic? How do we, and we ended up saying, hey, for what we want, which is, very, very clean and very sensitive measure of, how aroused you are with something that you're listening to. Let's drop central nervous system measures. Let's look at peripheral let's look at peripheral nervous system, and then we start to explore GSR, which is
so I think it's really fascinating, your whole origin story in its entirety, because it does kind of lead to what we wanted to talk about today with this current issue in terminology in the space. And it does go to the idea of there's this push and pull from industry versus academia about what is the right way to address things. And so I kind of want to hear a little bit of what your thoughts are for that, especially in reference to the ICO statement that we had shared. And we will share the ICO statement in our show notes, so that way, if you haven't read it, you can read it. But what are we talking about here? Especially, I've noticed that you've said specifically you're using psychophysiology, not biometrics. So can you just elaborate a little bit on why you're choosing your wording so carefully?
Sure. So when I read it, I thought, okay, the field has really, we really dug ourselves into this, and I think that that is because the tension between clients and companies, between clients and the academia, and people having to make money at the end of the month, and big teams which need to be supported, but also some inability to resist client pulse. So basically, what I said about the statement was that, well, actually, there's two problems here. One of the problems is actually the use of the term biometrics. So the statement is around the misuse of biometrics, and what I was claiming is that actually, when you look at the things that are being discussed, they're altogether completely different things with different uses. So it starts, what is biometrics? And if you search, and initially we were also using the term initially we were using psychophysiology, and then clients didn't understand, and then we actually switched to biometrics. And now what we've done is we're sort of going back and using
trying to bring them back. Yes.
Bring them back because when you mention biometrics, and this has happened with everyone who we talk to, clients, but also partners. So I'm talking with a marketing agency and I say, hey, I want you to produce something around biometrics. And what they come up with is identity. So it's methods to show.
Well, if you Google it, that's what comes up. Fingerprints, retina scans.
That's it. And so what the ICO statement does is it just bundles everything together. So there's the use of fingerprints, retina scans, facial analysis to actually determine who is someone, and and for identity purposes, which has its own set of problems. Like even in criminology. So my background, predictive policing. So predictive policing based on facial features. It has its own set of problems. Not only the fact that the algorithms are biased because they're trained on biased data sets, but also, of course, the issues of privacy, etc. So that's one set of problems. Then there's the other set of problems, which is around the other stuff that they put in that bucket, which is the methods that neuromarketing or cognitive neuroscience companies use, which is, hey, now there's a bunch of stuff like emotion AI, EEG, GSR, and so they just bundle everything and say, hey, lots of unfunded claims. Yes, lots of unfunded claims, lots of claims which are funded, which are which, and this is the problem. So you can't just throw everything and say, hey, this is not valid. Because there's a bunch of stuff that is not valid, and it's the fault of the companies in the field and the organizations who oversee the
I really like that you describe it that way, that it is kind of our own fault, because we are part of this community of applied neuroscience or applied cognitive science or whatever you want to call it. And, I always, when I give my talks on the subject, I always talk about the evolution of the name, because, there was neuromarketing, and then people fell out of favor, and then it became, everybody was talking system one, and then that fell out of favor, and now it's all behavioral science, and it'll just be a new name, right? They're just going to rename it. But these measures have been around, for quite some time now, if you think all the way back to phrenology even. But it is kind of our own fault in trying to make things simple so that you can talk to people who are not PhDs about it, right? By saying that, EEG can read this in someone's brain, right? When you make it simple, you make it easy to understand, but you also overgeneralize, right? And I think a lot of, the client side people are very excited about these ideas and they run with it. And I think the excitement is great. But of course, there's a downside, right? Where then, there are expectations. And of course, we want to meet those expectations because we do want to sell our product. And we want to say that we can do something. It is very hard to say you can't do something. Our salespeople at HCD actually make jokes about how we are maybe a little too comfortable with saying we can't do something. Because of course, as a salesperson, you want to be able to say we can do anything, but we always think that it's really important. And that's, again, what I think we appreciate about you and MindProber is being very realistic about things. So when it comes to addressing these very types of issues about how we talk about things, what is it that you currently do at MindProber? What sort of methodologies do you use? How do you balance this issue of overpromising, but also trying to explain what it is that you can offer?
Sure. Let me say that there is no easy way to solve that problem. And,
Right.
the way we solved it is we actually ran away from the problem. And so, meaning we do say as a company no to most things because we only do one thing. And so the way we solved it, and I understand that other companies can't do this or can't afford to do this, but we were funded to do this one thing, and that's from an investor standpoint, for instance, that's what our investors want to do.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we actually dictate what's the use of our metric, and so there's nothing else that we do but measuring arousal to media using GSR. And that's all we do. And, and what my science department does all day is to come up with ways of actually showing that if you monitor emotional arousal to media, if you synchronize it, there's a bunch of applications and a lot of value that you can extract from it, like, real-time activation of spots whenever people are excited, all this type of things. So we actually did it the easy way, which was we avoided the problem.
I would argue though that you said, I think you're being very humble in what you're saying by only doing GSR, but I would also say that GSR is an incredibly complicated tool when you really get under the hood of it. So most people don't realize that you have to consider the phasic versus tonic reactions that people are having and what that even means, as well as, things like drift. And so with all of these considerations in place, you have to be a real expert in the tool that you're using to do it correctly.
Correct.
And so like I said, I just want to say that doing GSR is a big undertaking in itself. And so you have
what
to make
you're doing
sure
is admirable, right?
But when I say that we just do GSR, I'm not claiming it's simple. I'm claiming that, we just do this one thing. And so if someone comes to us and says, hey, listen, I have this new exciting project around, measuring, stress in pilots. We will say no. So that's not what we do. It could be done. I could use, HRV. I could do, I won't do it because I'm not mandated to do this, and that's not what my company was built.
That's a good point. So you don't have to promise for other things.
That's it, because this is the thing that we do. So for instance, if a client, and of course we're still testing the hypothesis that in the long run this will pay off. So we're still testing it. But I can, a client can come to me and say, hey, you know what, I need to measure this, and then I really need a huge report and what I will tell them is, listen, I'm not a marketing agency. Go get a cool marketing agency. We'll deliver them a technical report. And that's what we'll deliver. Here's the data on the platform. Here's the technical report. You want to make it shiny? Go make it shiny.
Right. So you're not trying to explain anything beyond what you did.
Yeah.
Correct. So, and we won't make claims besides what the data allows me to make. And this is very clear from the outset.
And I would also,
that's where the complaint from the ICO comes from, because, the complaint is that people have been overstating what their measures are doing. Right.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that comes from emotion AI. Right. I think they're, like you were saying, when you have bad data in, it's bad data out. If the data is biased in any way, or how it was collected, or the algorithms that are used in the background. And so I think that's where a lot of this statement came from, is that the problem is that it's overgeneralized, right? It's damning all of emotion AI, where there are some real uses you can use AI to look at responses, and also damning all of, biometrics. So where do you think this kind of leads us?
Well, I think that the industry needs to do something. And I think that companies in the consumer neuroscience space need to do something. On one hand, they need to get a very tight grip on what they promise clients, and that's done with transparency. That's done with, I can't share a slide with a client saying, I'm sorry, like 95% of decisions are unconscious.
Right.
this doesn't mean anything. It's
No.
which decisions, what is conscious,
Right.
this
Literally.
this doesn't mean absolutely. Wolfgang Pauli used to say that this is not even wrong. Because it doesn't
That's
mean
funny.
anything.
It's
Doesn't
so
mean anything.
general that it can't be wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's the
so-
problem with that statement, the 95% statement, is that you can't prove that it's wrong. But that's
Yeah,
because it's untestable.
Correct. It's what does that mean? So
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
And so what you need to do is you need to define very clear applications of methods in which you are an absolute expert in. And you need to show the papers.
So
in our sense, you need to show the papers. You need to show the algorithm. When someone says, well, I measure motivation.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Define it,
What does that
please.
mean?
Yeah.
What's the metric? Where's the paper? Where's the paper that shows that if you're using EEG, if you get this frequency from this electrode side, that frequency from that electrode side, just to mix those two, and then maybe you have some hints on whether the person is more motivated or not to do whatever.
So this question, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so I think that's one, which is getting the grip. The other one is from the vendors. So listen, there are vendors who, okay, I'm not English, so the word that comes to my head, I'll just say it. I think there are vendors who like and want to be bullshitted.
Oh yeah.
And that's okay. If you want to be bullshitted, that's okay. If you want the company to tell you exactly what you want to hear, that's okay.
Exactly.
That's all right. That's all right. There's people who do it. But then there are
checking
others,
a box. Yeah.
But then there are others who don't. There are others who have actual, true, and very valuable research questions.
Yeah.
The ones that I've worked with and who are really, really interested and have the money to do it, they bring in an external consultant. So it has happened to us before where we're working and there's an external consultant. He's not biased, he's not compromised, he's an academic with published.
Yeah.
And he sits with us on the table and he makes really, really hard questions. And he says, I don't believe that, show me. And we feel that these are the partnerships that really, really work. If you're doing, research, research to know
And
stuff and not.
I think your point is very good that the having the external consultant is a very good move on the client side. When I used to work on the client side, so I've worked at large companies like Mars Chocolate and Johnson & Johnson, and I was hired there for that purpose. So it was my job to ask the hard questions, and I would challenge people all the time and make them bring me all the data and show me exactly what they did. And I think that that's a mistake that a lot of, the vendors are doing. So a lot of these market research companies that are using these tools, these neuromarketing companies, they have assumed that their client is stupid, right? That they can just say the 95% thing and people will believe. But I think more and more often they're starting to hire people like you, like me, like Kathryn, to be the person that says, show me how.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's becoming more and more common to have, even a PhD level or a master's level scientific person that's going to question these things. And I think that's something that we're starting to see in the neuromarketing industry. You do media. It seems like we do more product research. So the type of clients we deal with tend to be PhD scientists already, right? Because they work in R&D, they have a PhD in chemical engineering, they have a PhD in statistics, they have a PhD in food science, whatever it might be. And so we have to deal with people who are asking hard questions regardless. And I've always said,
data, right? And they're curious about the data.
Yes,
they're curious.
Yeah.
They know how to read a graph. They know that these things, for me to say that they're different, I have to show they're statistically different, where you may not get that as often in media. I think we're starting to, though. So I've said for years now that, people that are making these promises and doing it in media are going to have their questions asked eventually. And so I'm glad to hear that you're seeing a lot of that. Now, to address the first thing that you were bringing up, now I haven't been to an NMSBA conference since 2014 because I kind of opted to not go anymore. But last time I was in the meeting, they were actually talking about certification. And this is on the one hand, it's a good idea because maybe it does solve the problem of the ICO statement, right? So if, MindProber and HCD are certified because we say we use this algorithm, I can show you exactly what the algorithm is. I can show you what the metric, what things go into it, and I can show you the papers that show that it's valid, right? It's been validated. However, you'll never see what I actually do with a client, right?
Correct.
So that's where the problem is with certification. So let's say I'm using EEG, I have a metric, it's been validated, it's been published. That doesn't mean that's what I'm actually doing. And that doesn't actually mean that's how I'm interpreting the data. So there's no checks on that. But also when you have certification, and let's say it's certified through an organization like NMSBA, which is for profit, right? You are paying to play. So basically you're paying for your certification. So what's the validity in that? It's kind of like when people slap organically certified on their food product. Does it actually mean that it's organic? Does it actually mean there's no pesticides? We'll never know.
Well, that's what it comes back to, is this whole theme of defining your terms. Like what does it mean? What does the certification mean?
Exactly. What is the certification? And who's pushing it?
Yeah.
And so is it the vendor who are like, hey, because short term, bullshitting is clients is profitable. So it's like, it is something that will hurt them. It has hurt before. So it has hurt neuromarketing for sure. And so it went up, it went down, and now it's going up again. It will go down again if we don't get grips on this. And so who is actually pulling the certification? Is it the companies or is it the clients? And again, I think that it goes from the clients and even for us. So for the companies who are interested in, let's call it transparent research or whatnot, it's even good for us to have those external consultants. So I can give you an example where I've had a client who and their communication agency who was, hey, let's get the data, let's do all sorts of ad hoc analysis after we have it, and us saying, hey guys, no, we need to have a defined set of hypotheses before, because we want to ad hoc explanation of the patterns we see in the data, and we need to have power, and we want to, we need to correct for multiple comparisons and all these things, which are like basic research, which we put on the table when we're sort of enabling the client. Clients are like, yeah, but we can sort of push the envelope, but then you have another guy that says, yeah, I won't let them do it. He has nothing to lose. He's an external consultant.
Right.
So he said, yeah, the project has been adjudicated. It has. So I won't let those guys do that. And they say that they won't do it, and I won't let them do it, even if they have the temptation to.
Yeah. It's the mediator, basically. For
it's even good. So if you're certain of what you're delivering, it's even good to have these people there because they will help you. In the end, they're academics, so they will help you with the client. They will help you say no to the client. And in the long term, that's good for the company. In the long term, that's really good.
100%. Because otherwise, it could just be another failed thing they tried doing. Because I think when neuromarketing was first coming out, let's say in like 2012, when it was like reaching its first peak, I think a lot of people ended up being disappointed, right? Because they were told that EEG was going to like explain all the advertising. And there was a lot of disappointment and there was a lot of pushback where big companies like Coca-Cola said, you know what, never again. We're not doing it again. And it was like, not even allowed to consider using neuroscience or psychology. They're coming back around now, but it's taken time to like recover from those wounds.
Yeah. And I think it's around, again, thinking about the value that, because EEG, EDA, electrical activity, heart rate, these metrics have really, really powerful signal for some questions. And so the signal is there for some research questions, for some applications. It is around doing the work of discovering that value and selling that value and showing that value to the clients. Again, for us, it's very easy because, my research department, my science department, since 2017, and, back then my science department was me, and plus one co-founder. And now, luckily, I have one science department to, all day, every day, all they have to do is extract value from metrics. So, we have the ability to get, psychophysiological data from panels, from thousands of people. So we're just gathering it always.
Yeah.
And all they have to do is look at those signals and extract value and show value and say, and so that's my dream job, as I usually tell them. I wish I was still doing that.
Oh,
but so we're lucky in that sense, because that's all we have to do.
yeah.
And,
So I guess with all that being said, then to wrap up this really, this interesting conversation is, what do you think that we can do as people within this space to really try to future-proof the field and do better? What would be your, your advice and takeaway?
So on one hand, having really, really strong internal science departments. So companies need to have really strong internal science departments, consumer neuroscience companies, who, hopefully publish, but at least are, doing technical reports whenever there's a study. Here's a technical report. Don't send me a 20-slide or 30-slide PowerPoint. So send me that, plus a technical report that explains exactly what you've done. So these guys, so if you have these guys within the company, these are guys who, they know the method, they know how research works, and they can actually do that. So on one hand, there's that. So we need people who are just dedicated to understanding the metrics and extracting value. If you have a company who, it's a couple of marketing guys, they don't know the metric. They may use it, they don't know it. And so you need to have these people within the company. And then again, it's around transparency. It's around showing the clients exactly what you've done with the data. And it's, as you are doing, it's saying a lot of no's. It's saying a lot of no's. If you're not sure that you can help the client, just say no. And because in the end, it will come and bite you.
It does.
I have seen this where I'm working with a client, and then here's a report from a past study, and I tell them, listen, I'm sorry, that's impossible.
Yeah.
That's impossible. So
we've had the same thing. We've had clients come to us and we've said no to them, and they went and they did it with someone else, and they came back and said, you were right.
Yeah.
You were right to say no. We probably shouldn't have done that.
Right. So but it's good that we're having these conversations. And in a way, I'm grateful that the ICO released a statement like that, because it really ignited a big conversation among all the people within this space. And so even if what was written isn't necessarily correct, and there was a lot of things that we would, again, try to improve on, and it did evoke a lot of conversations. But with all that being said, I do want to make sure that we have time for our game that we play. We're at the point where it's the react attack game. So really easy. I'm going to list off 10 random words to you, and then you just say the first thing that pops into your mind. Really rapid fire, implicit free association exexercise. Are you ready?
Yes, I would look so stupid. Okay.
All right.
You wouldn't believe some of the answers we've had, so you're good.
All right. So first word, biometrics.
Biometrics. Confusing buzzword which needs to be rethought.
Emotions.
Emotion. Everyone knows what it is until we're asked to define it.
That's good.
James, sorry.
Academia.
Academia. Well, very, very interesting, very slow moving. I hope to get back there after I retire.
Buzzwords.
Buzzwords. Sometimes you need to use them, but you have to be very, very careful.
Claims.
Claims. Back up your claims.
Good. That's good. Clients.
Clients. The most important prospects or partners that a company can have, we need them to be opened, and they're very, very interesting clients if you're truthful to them.
Noise.
Noise. Data is noisy. Noise is what characterizes psychophysiological data. A lot of noise.
Media measurements.
Media measurements. very complex space where we're, starting to dip our toes in and trying to learn. I think we have a great tool for media measurement.
GSR.
Classically unexplored, I would say, or underexplored types of signal for consumer neuroscience, let's call it, but hyper valuable. I think underexplored because it is so simple, let's call it.
Yeah.
And now the last word, MindProber.
MindProber. Well, MindProber is about to rebrand.
Oh. Well, this is a really good way to intro that.
News. So first, you're actually the first people outside MindProber who I'm telling this to about to rebrand. Well, the most enjoyable thing I've ever done in my life, the most enjoyable professional thing I've ever done in my life, and a company whose people I'm incredibly proud of.
That's awesome. What a great way to end it, and an exciting note to end on too. That's really, we're looking forward to the future of what's to come in 2023. Before we close out, I do want to ask, if people wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way that they could reach you to ask you questions about everything that we talked about today?
Sure. Well, easiest way I would say is my LinkedIn. So I'm always on top of LinkedIn. So Pedro Almeida, LinkedIn. Of course, there's my email, which is not easy to. Part of the reason why we're branding. So pedro.almeida@mindproberlab.com. Just search me, and I'm easy to find.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us today and for this great conversation. I know we'll be in touch very soon, so it's not the last time we'll be hearing from you, but thank you for joining us.
Yes,
Awesome.
thank you so much. A great conversation.
Thank you so much for the invite. Thank you very much.
And thank you everybody for joining us.
For more information or updates, follow HCD Research on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter @HCD Research Inc. and @HCD Neuroscience. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to rate, review, and follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you, and stay tuned for more curious conversations.